Episode 80, Fish Unfiltered. I'm your host, Kevin Barral, here with my friend and co-host, Isaac Azout. We're here with Ely Sussman, founder of Fish on First, and season's over. The Marlins finished with a 79-83 record. Much needed and big improvement from this team from going from 62 to 100 to this current record. They were in it up until the final game against the Philadelphia Phillies, which I believe was on September 25th. And Peter Bendix is coming off of his, exit press conference, however you want to call it. So a lot to talk about. Isaac, how are we doing? This is going to be a packed episode, and it's going to be the streak of finally going back to the bi-weekly episodes, too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Like you said, the season has ended. It is game 2 of the Major League Baseball postseason wild card series. A couple of fun games already under our belt. And yeah, we got a lot to discuss. Your president of baseball operations, Peter Bendix, spoke to the media this morning. We'll discuss some of that. And yeah, it's going to be, it was a nice, happy mood inside the Lone Depot Park press conference room that we'll get into shortly.
All right, let's get it going. I'll start with Eli. Eli, just overall, what were your thoughts on the season? Like, I think I speak for all of us when I say that we were highly surprised from what we saw in terms of the record, in terms of certain performances. But it was also a really good year to see a lot of these young players finally come up, right? Like Augustine, Jacob Marcy, to make those debuts. Finally got the return of Sandy Alcantara, who had a really rough first half of action, but after the All-Star break, or after the trade deadline, I would even say, looked pretty good on finishing the season off on a high note. Yuri Perez, a little rocky there in the middle of the year, but returns from Tommy John. There's a lot of excitement, I think, now leading into 2026. And I think I'll lead it in with, do you think, first of all, just thoughts on the year, but do you think now 2026 begins a window of where this team could be a little bit better than what people thought would be maybe the team in 27 or 28 that would really start competing?
You covered it in that monologue briefly right there about how from a wins and losses perspective, this felt like a best case scenario for them to improve by 17 wins from the year before, for them to briefly in a couple different pockets of the season to actually flirt with the wild card spot. And yet things didn't go perfectly smoothly for this team in terms of their health and availability of certain key players, even in terms of the performances of those players. For them to be in this position, despite getting what was all things considered a bad year from Sandy, you can try to tilt the narrative any way you want, but as an overall player, he didn't help them win that many games compared to if you had just replacement level players in his spot. For his performance to be that bad, for several other key players to just not be available, for Ryan Weathers, when on this pod entering the season, I think everybody believed that Ryan Weathers could be the most valuable pitcher on this team, that he would be a huge ingredient, and for him to only make a handful of starts the entire year, and yet for so many other unexpected people to step up makes this in some ways really encouraging. Doesn't mean that all these players are going to have linear development moving forward. I feel like that's something that didn't come up in the presser, but I think is important when you're dealing with one of the youngest teams in baseball and one that did get performances from a lot of unexpected places. Even if the underlying numbers look good, it's hard for players to just keep getting better from their rookie year onward in a direct line. So in terms of what 2026 looks like and them contending, it is still going to require a lot of outside help, in my opinion. And fortunately for anybody in that front office, they should have a lot of opportunities to acquire outside help because they have serious depth in several places, especially in the starting pitching department and in the outfield, that I think anybody following the team this over the course of the season is aware of. They have players that their stocks are up and their trade value is up. So even if you're not totally sure what you're going to get from them next year, I think other teams are going to be interested, and you can build a more well-rounded roster. And most importantly, they just have so much opportunity to spend money and simply buy players to come aboard, even on short-term deals, even if it's not true top of the market situation. They're not going to be a landing spot for Pete Alonso, even though I've seen more than a few people dream about that already as a particular position they want to address, and as a player that has killed them in head-to-head play. Yada, yada. I'm not talking about quite that much money, realistically, that they're going to devote to any one player. But because some of the trades that they've made through the years, because of the performances they've gotten from guys that aren't even eligible for arbitration yet, and the fact that finally you have more dead money off the books from Avisail Garcia compared to what they were paying him in 2025, they have to spend more in free agency than they did the previous couple of years. There's already been some reporting out pointing to that, which I think is just stating the obvious because of how few commitments are on the books right now. It is an exciting time. I wouldn't say it's one where anything is guaranteed to them, though. This is really a pivotal offseason for them, not necessarily because there's pressure on them to win in 2026 and be a legit championship contender, but because this is time where they can make some very big decisions, and it feels like good problems to have in several areas. But when you're a team that is creeping towards 500, it is getting those final handful of wins to actually get into a playoff spot. Those are the hardest decisions to make. So you got to give the team a lot of credit, everybody involved, for how they performed this year. And in some aspects, they kind of got to start all over again. Even though it feels like the expectations are going to be higher, there's still, in my opinion, a lot to be done for them to take that next step, even if it just feels so tantalizingly close. There's still a lot of maneuvering to be done. And this is where Peter Bendix really proves himself, in my opinion, this offseason.
Want to add on to that, Mr. Isaac?
Yeah, this is a team that, like Eli said, definitely exceeded expectations. I think Peter Bendix made that clear that he just was not. He doesn't like to use the word expectations because that sort of implies that, hey, they didn't expect themselves to be very good. I think that there are a lot of areas that they can improve this team. I think in the bullpen, that was reported that they could get some help, outside help in that department. And I think you look at the corner infield spots; those are another two areas that, if you have some better production than what the Marlins had in 2025 in Eric Wagaman and Troy Johnston and Matt Mervis versus anyone else, any one of the top 5 free agent first basemen, not including Pete Alonso, you plug one of those guys in there, I think you at least add another couple of wins, and same goes in the bullpen. And I think with Peter, it's going to be tough. I don't know if this is how Peter proves himself, because it's not up to him how much money is available for him to spend. I think a lot of it is going to have to depend on trades. He was asked this morning whether, he sees waiver claims or minor league free agency or trades or big league free agency as the main route of acquiring more talent. He, of course, used his classic line that there are many ways to improve this club, and he's going to attack every single one of them. But personally, I do see the trade avenue being most realistic, with a couple of free agent adds, particularly at first base and in the bullpen, even though this bullpen was one of the strongest parts of this major league team, in my opinion. And they have more than a handful of guys who could legitimately be high leverage guys in Fauché and Phillips and Henriquez and even Bender, and Tinoco already underwent surgery. There's a couple of guys that this bullpen is pretty stacked as is, in my opinion, which is pretty scary, with not including the few guys in AAA Jacksonville and Josh White, Eknes, and Belgrave, who can immediately step in and, at least at the beginning, toss some semi-high leverage relief innings as well. So this team is in a much better spot than I think they could have ever been. For example, following the 23 season, I think this team is in a pretty decent spot. We're just going to have to assume that the rest of the division is also going to put all their chips in as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we could, just really quickly, like, you look at first base production specifically this year amongst the majors, Marlins ranked 28th in first base WRC plus. They put up an 83 WRC plus, negative 0.5 WAR, and that was between obviously Eric Wagaman, Mervis, a lot of guys. And could even just dive into that first base position, because you look even deeper. Then you have Davison De Los Santos, who was not very good this year. Nathan Martorella, who was not very good this year. And past that, you don't really have anyone good. Mm-hmm. So, obviously, the market, that first base market's going to be interesting because it's highlighted by Pete Alonso. After that, you have Josh Naylor. And after that, it's a pretty big drop-off. It's, Ryan O'Hearn, who probably would be a really realistic option for the Marlins. But I think you look even deeper down, it's Paul Goldschmidt, and we'll see if he decides to play in 2026. And I know that's one guy who you're looking at, Isaac. And then Josh Bell, who had 22 home runs and a return possible, maybe. But I want to go with the bullpen too. And you noted, and this is what Craig Mish said in the Marlins pregame show, his final one. It's that it's fair to say that the Marlins will be active in free agency, probably in a way we haven't seen over the last couple of years. What do you think that means to you, Mr. Isaac?
Well, what that means is that last year they had one free agent in Cal
We'll
Quantrill.
get two.
Well, Eric Wagnerman, a minor league free agent technically, who ended up making the team. And then the year before that, they had one major league free agent in Tim Anderson. So in total, you spent $8 million in free agency. So when he says that they will be spending money on free agency, unlike in years before, I don't know how much you could put into that, but I do assume that means at least a crooked number in free agents acquired. And I think there are a lot of, like you said, realistic options out there. Or guys that are coming off bad seasons. Paul Goldschmidt is one of them, first base side, and then in the bullpen, Devin Williams is another one. Cal Finnegan, fellow NL East guy, is another guy. There are some decent options that I think the Marlins could conceivably look at and be willing to spend on. And if the Marlins, if for some reason some of the guys that took big steps forward this last year don't do that next year, you have all of a sudden you have some nice trade chips coming up in July. So I think that's sort of the formula that Miami's going to continue taking. You're not going to see 4 or 5 year deals. As much as we'd like them to sign Pete Alonso, it's just not. They're not going to play like the Philadelphia Phillies. They're not going to play like the Braves. They have to do it this way. And for now, if 2025 was any indication of how that could look, hey, sign me up all day for that, because we saw what happened when the Miami did try and sign the Avi Garcias and the Johnny Cuetos and the Gene Seguras. They tried to give multi-year deals, and they just did not get a good return on investment there. So you can see why, you look at the 1, maybe 2 year deals for guys like Ryan Helsley or Raisel Iglesias or Finnegan or Williams or any of those guys.
Who do you like out of that list, Eli?
Devin Williams, I'd say. So on this graphic that FanDuel put together for Craig Mish, that shows the ERA. I care more about the FIP, the fielder independent pitching, and Devin Williams was about 2 runs lower than that. His FIP was sub 3. And pretty in line with his amazing career norms in that regard. I think he'd also be the most expensive player of this grouping for that reason, because most front offices, I believe, are looking at it the same way, where they're thinking about which of these guys get the most strikeouts and allow the fewest homers, regardless of what the results were this year, especially in the case of somebody like Williams that has an amazing track record every single year prior to this season with the Yankees. So I think he'll also be the most expensive one, not necessarily out of the Marlins price range, but somebody that if they do win the bidding for him, it would leave them he might be their biggest free agent signing. It might just mean less to spend on the other positions in his case. I need to check who his agent is. He's okay. So he's not a Boris guy. He's a Rep 1 baseball guy. Off the top of my head, I don't know what their reputation is in terms of the kind of contracts that they hand out. Yeah, I think they can afford almost any reliever that they want from this particular group. Obviously, someone like Edwin Diaz, if he opts out of his Mets deal, that'll be off the table. But a lot of other relievers are going to be available for them if they want to plug it in. I'm not quite as high on the bullpen as currently constructed as Isaac seems to be. Like they got amazing performances from Ronnie and also from Tyler Phillips, which I don't know how sustainable Phillips is, given how few strikeouts he gets and how much he relies on soft grounders in a way where that might be the best year that Phillips ever has in his career. I wouldn't be surprised. That being said, I do like the relievers that they have next up in the minors. With all these guys in particular that are highlighted and the biggest names available in this free agent class, it's a lot of right-handed relievers as well. And the particular vulnerability of the bullpen this year was the lack of lefties that they had, where they're really relying on Cade Gibson moving forward, a guy that was totally off their own radar at the start of the season. And given that Andrew Nardi is still a very big question mark with this group, and the fact that some of their other lefty prospects haven't progressed as well on the reliever side as the righties have, I can see them definitely spending something on somebody in this group right here. And that would help. Then again, if you really look back at it this season, it wasn't like they were losing games with their top guys on the mound. Some of the most frustrating losses the Marlins had is when in unusual spots, McCullough would put in low leverage relievers in those situations. In terms of just looking at the opportunity to be a better team next year than they were this year, it doesn't feel like having a different bullpen ace in that role would have made a huge difference this year. A lot of that came down to the decision making. That being said, to be fair, I think looking forward, we're all anticipating that McCullough is going to be a better manager in 2026 than he was in 2025, just learning from experience in those situations. And it's never a bad thing to give him more good options to choose from and squeeze maybe some of the guys that were put in bad positions this year, squeezing them off the active roster, certainly, and maybe off the 40-man entirely. That'd be a good thing to have. So, yeah, I'd be for it. There's a few different directions to go with improving this team, and I can understand why reliever is – you can never really have too many of these guys. As awesome as they look in one particular year, the volatility from one season to the next is just – it drives you crazy. I think Jesus Tinoco is a great example where he was an amazing story down the stretch of last season. And then this year he was mediocre before getting hurt and then never coming back from his injury, undergoes surgery. So he's not even going to pitch for them in 2026. It's
like a non-tendered.
It's really a short list of guys. And that's why players like Devin Williams and Raisel Iglesias are going to get paid well. Even if it's on short-term deals, they're going to get paid very well because for most of their careers, they have been difference makers. And those are hard to find.
Yeah, with the bullpen, I think like you look at the second half and per Fangraphs, they had negative 0.9 WAR. But like to Isaac's point, they have guys who are really good, like with Henriquez, O'Shea, Phillips, like Bacher, who Peter Bendix singled out in his press conference today. And I think a big reason for the second half fall off in terms of the negative 0.9 WAR is because guys like Josh Simpson, George Soriano, Valente Beoza, who allowed 6 home runs in his last appearance of the season. So it's a little skewed. I would personally like Raisel Iglesias. He's been really good for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And he's a Cuban guy who come back home. Yeah, it would entice him to return. I know you wouldn't appreciate that, Isaac, but whatever. I would also love Devin Williams. He has a nasty pitch. So
I'm curious, Eli, does Javier Sanoja's bullpen usage in the second half contribute to that negative WAR?
Yes.
It does,
a little bit, yeah. And they did.
Come on, man! Like he
was pretty high on the list of position players that were used in relief this season. But it's 8 innings total over the course of the year.
How many runs did he even allow?
He pitched in 8 games, which it has to be close to a season high for any position player in the Marlins in a single season. He threw 9 in the third innings. He allowed 17 earned runs, 24 hits, walked 5 guys. He struck out 1 batter. He did strike out a batter in those 9 in the third innings. But back to the bullpen, the reason I think they were in a pretty good spot, which maybe indicates that they might do something else this offseason, maybe trade from those. 4 of the top 9 guys ranked in WAR of this team were relievers, and Ronnie leading the way.
Not great.
Yeah, I'm just saying the bullpen with 2.3 WAR. Then it was Bender with 1.9, who was hurt a lot of the year. Then Tyler Phillips 1.8, and Cade Gibson at 1.4. 4 relievers in the top 9 players regarding WAR. So I think maybe we were early in the season at the trade deadline. There were rumblings that maybe the Marlins sell high on Ronnie Henriquez. Maybe the Marlins trade Anthony Bender. We did think they were going to trade those guys. And if there's any indication that Marlins are looking for outside help in the bullpen, maybe that says, maybe they're looking at first base help or third base help or any other help by trading some of these relievers who they're thinking can sell high, who they're thinking they can sell high on. I'd be okay with that. I think Ronnie is a really special player. He's got 4 years of control. I think they'd be selling a little bit early at this point in his career. You just, like with any pitcher, you never know when they're going to get hurt. Bender, I think, is pretty much a lock to eventually get dealt. Phillips is another one that Eli mentioned. We don't know how sustainable it was. He's really popular industry-wide with all his weird quirks this season, slapping himself in the face before every outing and really demonstrating for some pretty decent stuff. Miami acquired him for nothing. So if they can flip him for anything of value, that's a hell of a win. So I could see the Marlins dangling a reliever or two this offseason to try and replenish another area of the club. And when they know they can both internally and externally replenish the bullpen as well with the guys in AAA as well as maybe one of these free agents.
And just to going back to the point you made, Isaac, they have guys in minor leagues. Like they have guys who I would say are major league ready. Eknes, Belgrave, William Kepner, who many probably didn't even know was very good this year. And I'm missing the other one, Josh White, who was recently put in our top 30. He's one of the newcomers of the top 30. So there's guys who probably are going to be invited to spring training. I think Josh White actually has to be added to the 40-man, so he will be in big league camp, assuming he is added. So those are guys who can help the team out right now. And those replace the Sorianos, the Simpsons of the world. And I don't know, maybe you just need one reliever externally that you could sign, but I feel like first base and third base are the big priorities. Those should be the big priorities. And I think Eli also noted that, like, just get more swing and miss in your bullpen. You don't have a lot of swing and miss guys in the bullpen. Maybe Henriquez and Balker. I feel like that's about it. The rest of them are really not a lot of strikeout dominant relievers. So I think those guys on the graphic certainly help. But I think first base is by far the biggest thing they need to bring in, because geez, it was really bad, and it's been back-to-back years that first base production has been amongst the worst for the Marlins, in baseball. So let's start talking about Peter Bendix. He did meet with the media, as we have noted, and one of the topics mentioned was Agustin Ramirez, and he believes that one of the areas that this team still needs to improve in is catching defense. And he said that he thinks Agustin Ramirez is a major league catcher. He thinks he's shown what it is, but he still needs to improve. Yet catching defense is one of the biggest things he needs to fix. I think those were kind of contradicting statements from Peter, Isaac.
Yeah.
He also did not confirm that the coaching staff would fully return. He said that is a conversation that they need to have. But overall, I think it was a little more than last year that he did provide. I'll give him credit. But still, I think I left the press conference feeling exactly the same as I first walked in.
Yeah, let's start with the coaching staff. It was a total shot in the dark, assuming I knew he wasn't gonna, officially say no, or he wasn't gonna break that news right now in day 3 of the offseason, as he mentioned. It was just maybe sort of hoping that he would, but I didn't expect it to. Regarding Ramirez, yeah, he said what I thought he would say regarding. Yeah, I think he's got the capability of being a major league catcher, even though all evidence pointed to the contrary this regular season. He wasn't even catching that much towards the end. And he just really, after Fortes was traded, it's looked to get even worse. So many, I forget exactly how many pass balls he actually did have to go along with the 10 or 9 errors that he had. And then following that, saying that the one area of the team that he'd like to see improved is the catching defense. So I think you and I spoke to him privately afterward. He's very excited about Joe Mack. You asked him that on the record. And I think that's all but certain that Mack is going to basically replace Ramirez's catching time. You'd think. He was really high on Liam Hicks. He's someone that he also pointed out and singled out during that press conference. And there's really not a lot of room for 3 of them. We tried to get him to say if they're going to try and expand Ramirez's defensive versatility, maybe trying at first base, but he would just not comment on that whatsoever. So it looks like they're going to give it another shot. We're going to have to see how this goes in spring training, because this is going to be the first, full spring training as the primary catcher. So I think he'll have an opportunity to be really good. But I didn't like the contradicting statements there either.
19 pass balls for Agustin in 2025.
19 pass balls.
I want to be clear. Agustin Ramirez did not start the season with the Miami Marlins on the major league roster. For him to come midway through the season, a little bit before midway through the season, and have 19 pass balls, allow 83 stolen bases against 8 caught stealing. And by the way, the 19 pass balls led Major League Baseball by far. Really bad.
And the 10 errors did as well.
Yeah, just to give even more crazy context to the pass balls, he had more pass balls by himself than any other team had collectively. He, on his own, without even including the other Marlins catchers, he individually would have led all teams in Major League Baseball this year. Now, you did reference he didn't start the year with the Marlins in the big leagues. And why was that? One of the big factors behind that is that they wanted to gain the extra year of club control over him, where his free agency is after essentially 7 seasons instead of 6 seasons. And that is also why I expect Augustine to start next year as a catcher, so that they can do the exact same thing with Joe Mack. I think Joe Mack is going to come up very early in the year, but not on opening day, because the difference between opening day and even the middle of April is that in terms of service time, he's going to be limited enough so that his free agency gets pushed back an entire year. So instead of acquiring an entirely different catcher, entirely different veteran catcher to, serve as a stopgap, they'll give Augustine one last chance. And over a course of a matter of weeks, I would think, at the start of the season. And then when Matt comes up, we'll see how Augustine does. I mean, as long as he's hitting well offensively, they're certainly going to find a spot for him, whether it's DH or trying out first base, etc. if for whatever reason Augustine starts in a really bad offensive slump at the beginning of the year, it was not totally out of the realm of possibility that he gets options to Jacksonville for a brief period of time. Not, as I said before, not all development is linear, even though we all feel very optimistic about him as a long-term offensive player. That's still one of the many possible universes. There is one where Augustine actually gets sent down and replaced by Joe Mack for a brief period of time on the big league roster. I think it comes down to that, where as they look forward, they think the most likely possibility is that they're going to hold down Mack for a brief period at the start of the year in order to focus on that long-term sustainability, in order to maximize their years of club control. And then when he comes up, then they'll solve that problem then in terms of how those pieces fit together.
Yeah, and the last stat, Augustine Ramirez as a DH hit 249, 294, 486 with a 780 OPS. He was even worse as a catcher. So, I mean, you could even make the case that, like, the pressure of catching, the pressure of making sure he has this down pat is certainly hurting him. And I would compare kind of the Xavier Edwards situation where X was at short and he really wasn't hitting, to the expectation that we thought he would or do what he thought he would. And then goes to second base, looks awesome defensively, and then, got to go. And there's a second baseman towards the latter half of the season, looked really good. I know he had some slumps that really hurt him, but he finished the season off on a high note. So I think that's another thing. Isaac, anything else that stood out to you during the press conference? And again, fans that think we don't push hard for questions, we don't ask, we asked. Everyone asked, will Sandy be on the team come spring training? Will Sandy be your opening day starter? Will you sign a player to a contract extension? Will you sign free agents? Will you spend money? Did Bruce talk to you about spending money? It was all asked. So for any fan who thinks that we don't ask the questions, the full recording is on fishonfirst.com. You can check it out. It's also on my Twitter. You can check it out. He was pushed for questions. Regardless of the outcome of the season, he was asked a lot. Anything else that stood out to you guys?
Yes, a few things. Peter, this was his second end-of-year press conference as president of baseball operations, and I think this time he looked a lot more comfortable fielding questions with his opening remarks. Obviously, hey, this is a season that he did not lose 100 games, so, that makes sense, but he did seem a lot more comfortable. He did, for the first time, actually mention names on his own, like you mentioned, Liam Hicks, Lake Bacher. So that was nice to see. Stowers as well, of course. And the other part of the head of communications, John Eric Alvarez, mentioned before the whole thing started were some cool stats about the attendance, obviously, which was nice. And then the TV viewership, which surprised me. They allegedly, the viewership on FanDuel went up 92% from last year, which I guess, makes sense when you're not playing Vidal Brujan and certain other guys every day. And you have all these walk-offs and all-star. That'll bump up TV ratings. So that was good to see, and I think it can only go up next year as well. And regarding Sandy, yes, last year, at this time of last year, they were comfortable in saying that Sandy Alcantara will be the opening day starter. Circumstances have changed. He was recovering from Tommy John surgery. They had no intention on trading him without at least proving that he was healthy. At this time, now he finished the year extremely healthy and extremely well. And, when he was asked point blank, are you comfortable in saying that Sandy will be with the Marlins in spring training? He did his classic non-answer, which essentially was, I don't feel comfortable singling out any individual player. We want to make our team better. There's a lot of ways to make this team better. And he's going to be as disciplined as possible when it comes to that. And if that means to trade Sandy, then that means trading Sandy. I don't know if they can, literally, because of how much money he's owed. He's owed $17 million this year with a club option for another 17 following year. They need that money on the payroll. I don't know how, if they trade Sandy, I don't know how they can justify having that low of a payroll.
They could keep the money. They keep the money and just trade the player, and which would eventually get you probably a better package.
Right. If they do trade him and take care of the money of the 17 million, or at least most of it, which is what a lot of teams do in order to generate a better prospect package, then that would work out just as well, and if anything, even better. It depends on how they view Sandy. I think they really thought that they were going to trade him at the trade deadline. So we shall see. This isn't our prediction show, but if I had to predict, I would say he gets dealt this offseason. I think that's likely. He couldn't have finished the season better. So that's why I can't say that he had a bad season, like we said earlier. I think he had a tale of two seasons, which it doesn't make sense. The numbers are the numbers for his 2025 year, but in my opinion, that second half really sort of made it just a neutral year for him.
Well, and on top of that, now his offseason is going to look a lot different, right? Well, he did say it would be a normal offseason. I think he did say that last year, but really, like, I don't think that was the case, in my opinion. Like, you're still coming back from this injury. You still have to build up. He's going to have a normal offseason now, fresh 1 year removed or over a year removed from the surgery. Yeah, I mean, you like to dream that this rotation could be Sandy, Yuri, Cabrera, Weathers, and whoever that fifth starter may end up being, because that could be one of the best rotations in the National League, maybe baseball. When you look at it, I mean, the way that the Marlins finished out the year with those three guys on the mound was awesome to watch, and it really gave you like a look of wow, like 2026 could be a really fun year if they hold on to these guys, but we'll see. And the one thing to note really quickly is that the Marlins are now adding on the payroll, or not to the payroll, the contract of Giancarlo Stanton, the $10 million that he's owed. So now there's a little bump up in the payroll, not a lot, but they're going to have to add regardless of the payroll. Like, they're going to be forced to do it if it's through extensions or free agent signings. Like, I think a good example is what the A's did, right? They extended Brent Rooker. I think Lawrence Butler was one of the guys extended. They signed Luis Severino to a contract. Like, they're going to have to do things similar to that. Are they going to do it? Well, I don't know. They're having conversations. So we'll just have to wait and see, right?
Yeah. And I don't see many potential extension candidates here. Stowers already is old. Yuri, I think they're too late on that. Marcy is too
Thomas
old.
White makes the most sense.
Thomas, the only guy in the organization that I think could make some sense are either Thomas White or Robbie Snelling. Pre-debut extensions, I'm usually not a fan of that, but if a team like the Marlins or the Rays have a chance to hold on to these guys through their free agent years and through their prime years, you have to do it now and assume the risk. But this team has clearly been as risk averse as possible under this ownership group. So I tend to, especially with pitchers, I don't see it as likely. But like I said, everyone's saying Marcy. They're not going to extend Marcy. I can promise you that.
The other thing I think they should bring in through free agency, and he mentioned this last year, funny enough, and we didn't ask him this year, but like, they need a veteran presence in the clubhouse, at least on the position player side still, right? Like, Sandy, sure, but like, we've seen it for a couple of years now. Like, yeah, you could call him a leader, but he's more of a lead by example. He's not really much of a talker. So I think and I know you're doing the way too early projected 2026 roster, and I think you're going to include Paul Goldschmidt in it. I think you noted to us. So do you think that's actually an option? But I also ask myself, could they do like a similar thing to like the Rob Brantley thing, where you're bringing in a veteran catcher, but like one that will actually make the roster, unlike Rob Brantley?
Unlikely. I don't think that's important to them. I think they're going to depend on their coaching staff. That
they were willing to go with 3 catchers last year.
Right. With Brantley, I think they were using him as a glorified coach for a little bit there. And yeah, you mentioned Sandy. I don't think that they're going to prioritize age. I do think that if they do go outside the organization for free agent help with an offensive player, yeah, all of these free agents are going to be, veterans, at least a little bit of veterans. But yeah, Paul Goldschmidt, in my opinion, would make a lot of sense. He'd practically be an improved Eric Wagman, even though he's not the same MVP player that he used to be. If he does decide to play in 2026, I think he'd make a lot of sense for this ball club. And he offers exactly what you're talking about in that veteran presence.
Alrighty. I know you want to talk about this, Isaac. 2025 versus 2023. I'll let Eli explain why 2023 is still the better team than the 2025 one, and then I will allow you to have your rebuttal.
Well, no, yeah, just before Eli goes, it's funny because it's all been discussed. So this team almost made the postseason. The 2025 team finished 5 wins shy of the 2023 team that did make the postseason. I think we can agree that the 2023 team was one of the worst postseason teams.
It's the worst
in a while. And so this debate came up, which team would have fared better in October? And I have my opinion. Let's hear you guys first.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult topic to broach because we got to kind of agree on ground rules here. One reason why 2023 was not a viable postseason opponents is because by the end of the year, they had lost a couple of their most pivotal players. Sandy went down with his injury. Yuri went down, and I think he would have been shut down due to usage, even if he was considered healthy. Luis Ariz literally hobbled to the finish, dealing with an ankle injury down the stretch. So they were just poorly positioned. But I think the general question isn't so much about where they were in that moment at the end of the year, but just the overall team quality and kind of just assuming relatively best case scenario with the guys that were available in those particular years. Yeah, to me, I think it is pretty clearly 2023. It was, we talked quite a bit about the bullpen on this show, and 2023 was a much deeper bullpen than they had in 2025. All the options they had for both righties and lefties just created so many opportunities to match up ideally late in game situations. Yeah, if we are assuming that the health of the best available pitchers, that was a pretty deep rotation that also had good upside between Sandy and Yuri, and Jesus Luzardo was awesome that year. Even Braxton Garrett was one of the really great stories of that season, somehow making it through almost the entire year and being extraordinarily consistent along the way, even if he's not the type of guy that would translate much into postseason play, because he's a guy that was all about command instead of swing and miss. And yeah, so with the lineup, there were a couple very big holes in the 2023 lineup that weren't there in 2025. I think that is an important distinction. At the same time, I mean, the upside at several of those lineup spots in 2023 was great. That version of Luis Ariz was the best year of his career. We all kind of knew in the moment that, wow, how is he this impactful as an offensive player? Because it was more than just the singles. There was quite a few doubles in there, and there were just enough walks and the occasional homer where he was beyond what they could have hoped for that particular season. Where as an individual player, I think even more so than somebody like Kyle Stowers. Stowers has a higher OPS this year, just because of the additional power and slugging that he provides. Might tell you that he's the better overall player, but in my opinion, Ariz getting on base about 40% of the time that season and making so many productive outs when he wasn't on base, that was kind of the most impactful individual guy on either offense, in my opinion. And from there, if we're incorporating the trades, of course, that they made in the middle of the season to complement Ariz with having Jorge Soler and Jake Berger and that version of Josh Bell, they did have power behind Ariz in a meaningful way that allowed, that I think fit pretty well together, and that was enough that even though they had holes deeper down in their lineup, they never really figured out shortstop. They never figured out first base. They never got anything from their catchers either. Those are three holes there where this current team didn't have gaping holes in any particular spot. I mean, they were weak, as we've covered, in the infield corners, but not to that same sub 600 OPS type of danger zone. It wasn't quite as dire of a need as that previous team had in 2023. I think you balance it all out, and ultimately, if you want to default to things like the run differential, historically bad as the run differential was in 2023 for a playoff team, it was still better than this current team. It was one that, all things considered, maybe offensively they were a tick below her, but they were just significantly better as a overall pitching staff, in my opinion. One interesting aspect of that is that both teams have Edward Cabrera, but they've two much different versions of him, where he was pretty mediocre in 2023 versus him being by far the best version of himself in 2025. I think, to me, more so than trying to win an argument here, it is kind of amusing to me how few of the players were on both of those teams, even though it was just a 2-year difference. There are just there's been so much roster churn since then that to me, I enjoy the fact that you can kind of compare them, and there are very few common threads, because of injuries, trades, and whatnot.
Yeah, and on top of that, you have like all these veteran pieces that this 2023 team had that I would say were kind of prepared for the moments a little more than 2025 in certain senses. Arias, Berger, Bell, Soler, even Yuli Gurriel. And I think the decision making on that team was so much better, right? Think about the Cardinals game, for example, like the shoe magic moment or whatever you want to call it, right? that's something definitely to keep. That like it was so much better, and I'll give and to Isaac's case, like the decision making really affected certain moments of this 2025 team. Hence Rockies series where they got swept. Then you have the Fenway moment, the one against the Braves recently against the Phillies. Like there were moments that really hurt the 2025 team, and that's something that our guy Nate Karsmer is writing about for Fish on First. Some of those games that really affected why the Marlins did not make the postseason. Because you take away a couple of those games, the Marlins are in the postseason right now, and we're having a completely different podcast. But I just feel like 2023 was built a little bit better for the moment. And I mean, Tanner Scott, Nardi had an awesome season.
Yeah, they both
And
did.
even like Soriano, who we now remember being so bad and not good, he was really good in 2023 when he got to the Marlins. So, even like the worst of the relievers were pretty good on the Marlins, where you can't say the same for this team. And I will, obviously, if you look at the run differential, and you make a good point, and you're going to make it because Sunil Ha pitched, but Jacob Stallings also pitched a lot of games. So I don't know. I still believe that 2023 was the better team. They were the more obviously experience definitely helps. You also had the season that Arise had, which will by far be the best season you will ever have in the major leagues. And you got the power that you really weren't expecting. Sandy wasn't Sandy, but he wasn't as bad as 2025 Sandy. But he wasn't, the Cy Young Award winner that we'd seen the year before. Yuri was awesome. Weathers wasn't even there, really. Like he's in AAA and
He was
coming
not
out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Luzardo, like you had 4 really good starting pitchers that you could count on every single day. And I don't think that was the case for 2025 at points in the season.
Yeah, no, I think without a doubt the pitching was better in 2023. They did score more runs in 2025. I think the offense, and I think you guys made a very good point that not the decision making per se, even though yes, of course, Skip, he did have a hell of a rookie season managing with the Marlins, and what they were in an all in mode, not all in, but they were a very aggressive team that was trying to win every single game as hard as humanly possible. So I think that sort of benefited them a little bit. They maybe did not punt games that this coaching staff did. I'm not just going to use Sanoja as an example. I think Valente Belloso, anytime you put him in the ball game, that was it. For example, that game in Philadelphia that comes to mind when Ryan Weathers couldn't really go deep. 4-1 game, 5-1 game, it's not over. They put in Belloso, all of a sudden you blink and it's 11-1. So I think that was the main argument that I had, that I agree with you guys, that the not decision making, like I said, but just the managing was a little bit more aggressive and built in to be, hey, we need to win every single game, especially going into September. The Marlins were as aggressive as any major league team in baseball and trying to win and trying to make it into the postseason. And then offensively, I think I would choose the 2025 offense over that 2023 team. That was a team that employed Brian De La Cruz and Gene Segura and Joey Wendell and Yuli Gurriel and Nick Fortes every single day for half of their lineup. It was a really it just felt like it had more holes. That
was a good De La Cruz, though. It wasn't bad De La Cruz.
It was already starting to be bad De La Cruz. It was this Brian De La Cruz with his 710 OPS. It was starting to be in his 88 OPS plus. He was a 12% worse than league average at hitting. It was starting to be bad, Brian De La Cruz, unfortunately. John Birdie was a nice little bright spot for that team. So yeah, you just failed to have, aside from Arise, Soler was good. I think Arise and Soler are the 2 all-stars in that season. Aside from that, Jazz was okay. Jesus Sanchez was okay. It's a meaningless argument. It's fun to point out and look at, especially since not a lot of guys overlapped with these two teams. The bullpen is the one that, I sort of forgot how nasty and how many options they had in Brazo, and in Okert was still okay, and Scott and Puck were incredible, including Nardi had 3 dominant lefties. They would just use lefties out of the bullpen. Yeah, and then they bring in Robertson, and sort of, it didn't help as much as they would have liked. But it's fun to look back at that team because it really was a special team for all of us. The first postseason that, there was fans in the stands that we got to cover together. But there's something about this 25 team that I just think they struck out way less, and I like this 25 team more, if that's okay to say.
Yep. Shout out Noah Berger for covering that game. Last thing I want to get to before we wrap up is the 40-man, because right now it is full. It is at 40, but it'll look a little bit different. There are certain guys on the 6th. So right now they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players on a 60-day IL, meaning they need to make 6 roster moves to add those guys back. And those players are Braxton Garrett, Max Meyer, Anthony Bender, Andrew Nardi, Jesus Tinoco, Tyler Zuber. Yes, Tinoco will not pitch in 2026, but he still needs to be added to the 40-man roster throughout the offseason. Now, we look at this right now. Clearly, there are players that do not deserve to be on this 40-man roster. Just, unfortunately, that is how you have to say it. Eli, I know you write an article about this. How do you think they'll manage the 40-man? Who are some guys to look at that could potentially be off the 40-man? And honestly, who are some guys on the 60-day IL who may not even make it back to the 40-man? They could just all together DFA.
Right. That's the point to clarify first, is that they have to activate these guys off the 60-day IL sometime between now and a few days after the World Series. They could do it at any point. I remember, I think last year they waited basically until the World Series ended before doing it. And from the guys that are currently hurt, it seems like Tinoco and Zuber. For Tinoco because he's not going to pitch next year, and Zuber because he was a waiver claim in the first place that didn't really have an opportunity to do a whole lot before getting hurt again, even if his injury isn't as severe. I think those are the two easiest places to start. And then once you get to the players on the 40-man itself, my mind goes first to Jack Winkler, who was DFA'd.
I didn't even realize he was on the 40-man still.
He was DFA'd at least once during the season. And I think he is one kind of nerdy distinction is that some of these guys, they can be DFA'd, they can pass through waivers, and there's some that would still actually be able to like stick in the organization because they don't have enough minor league service time yet. Now, in the case of Winkler, because he was outrighted to the minors early in the year, I think he could opt out. Again, they don't really care. All due respect to Jack Winkler, I don't think they care all that much what happens. If they really want him back, they can sign him to a new minor league deal entering 2026. Maybe that happens. So he would be the easiest place to start on the position player side. And then you go back to the pitching side, and I would think that George Soriano is in the most trouble because they gave him quite a few opportunities this year after giving him quite a few opportunities last year. Just too hittable. And the guy that you would think would have a better opportunity to miss bats just has not done it the same way since his rookie year. And he's also going to be out of minor league options, I believe, moving forward. So that makes it an easier call. Josh Simpson will be an interesting test case. I think he's kind of a true borderline candidate here. It was a bad year for him overall, of course, at the big league level. He finished off on a very good run the last handful of appearances. He didn't allow a run the last couple of weeks that he pitched, and he was actually throwing more strikes. We touched on how limited they are in terms of lefty reliever options. You can look right here. I have it split between righties and lefties. Only 4 lefty pitchers currently on the 40-man, and the only relievers are Gibson and Simpson while we wait for Nardi to return. So, and with him, I think that could go either way. I don't think he's necessarily an automatic say goodbye, as you might assume, just because of the way that he finished and because the eventually, as this offseason goes on, they'll try to improve in that particular department, and that will make it an easier call. But in terms of the near-term decisions, this first wave of moves, I don't think it's an automatic at all that he's gone. Elsewhere on the pitching side, we got really small samples of Christian Roa and really small samples of Freddie Tarnuk. I'm higher on Tarnuk, so I think, but also both of them had really good stuff, and they performed well in AAA on the strength of that stuff. It's not like a straightforward decision one way or the other, which one they'd want to squeeze off. Yeah, Valente Peyozo is in an interesting spot because how much he slumped down at the very end of the year. His stuff, we were excited in spring training that there was an uptick in his stuff, and it didn't really stick or make much of a difference whatsoever. So even though he's available to eat a lot of innings, if you don't think they're going to be good innings moving forward, then that's something you got to seriously consider. I think moving back to the position player side, Ryan Navarreto will be another interesting one where the small sample of him at the big league level was very good offensively and defensively.
He raked.
But at the same time, this is a guy that nobody bothered putting on their 40-man for the last 5 years. The last time he was in the big leagues was 5 years ago with the Marlins, and he's just been bouncing on one minor league deal after the other. So this is something to think about just in regard to Joe Mack, where I think because Mack has to go on the 40-man as well, that's going to be the next wave of moves after this one, is to protect him from the Rule 5. So I think Navarreto does get squeezed off either in this first wave or later in November when Mac officially has to join. And obviously, I'll be interested to see where that goes because he didn't really hit very much in AAA. I don't buy that very much. I think all things considered, even if you value his intangibles and his vibe, that's a player that is just below the threshold you want to actually stick on a roster. And he's yet another one that if you really want him, he's probably going to be available as a minor league free agent and you can re-sign him to a fresh deal. So I think when push comes to shove, Navarreto is in trouble, Winkler, Zuber, Tinoco, and George Soriano. Those are the guys top of mind. And yeah, there's another wave of decisions that we could get to, but as the offseason goes on. But I think that's the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, and actually, someone mentioned this to me, like the Josh Simpson thing. You guys remember Andrew Nardi, his first year, he was horrible. Like, he was really bad. A 9.82 ERA, but he had the 7.14 FIP. With Simpson, 7.3 ERA of 5.3 FIP. Like, I'm not going to say he's going to have a 2023 Andrew Nardi season, but as much as I would assume and would probably DFA him, they need lefties. He is one of 4 lefties, 5 lefties on that 40-man right now. So he's going to definitely be an option, to DFA, but also to keep around and see what you got, right? I mean, they clearly like him because they used him in every possible situation this season, including the 9th inning of a tie game at Fenway Park and Citizens Bank Park during extra innings and all that stuff. Another name worth looking at, and I don't know if he'll be on the 40-man the whole year, is our guy Troy Johnston. Isaac, do you think they keep him around the entire offseason? Like, he's a guy who, if they find another first baseman that they like and sign, he will definitely be someone who probably may be off of it. Aside from that, I think everyone is pretty safe. Like, Joey Wiemer made a very nice impression towards the latter end of the season, enough to keep him around, I would say. I know Eli, whatever. He's Derek Hill 2.0, but with more power.
Well, really quick with Simpson, yeah, it's a fair point. We've always liked the stuff. When he was a prospect, he was a name that we had circled for.
He was a top 30 prospect at one point, by the way, for us.
He and Nardi for us were good. Nardi was always a little bit better. And to end the season, Josh Simpson, his last 6 appearances, all of them, except the first one that I'm about to mention, 6 appearances against the Tigers and the Phillies, 2 playoff teams, 2 against each. He went 5 2/3, did not allow a single earned run, struck out 8. Like, the swing and miss was there. He wasn't walking guys. He wasn't leaving meatballs over the plate. He actually pitched really well towards the end of his season. So I think he earned himself another opportunity, especially this team does not have $400 million payroll. This team does not have sky-high expectations. I think there is room for, like you said, Kevin, one of the rare left-handers on the 40-man roster. In regards to Troy, it's going to be tough, unfortunately. I think he did as well as we could have hoped offensively. He had a really special performance on Saturday against the AL Central. No, not the AL Central champs, but the Detroit Tigers, who did make the postseason with the 2 home run game, including a walk-off home run. But other than those few moments, he had another nice moment in Texas where he had a couple of hits, including a home run. There are some flaws in the offensive game, unfortunately. He's an okay first baseman. He can be serviceable in the corner outfield spots. It's going to be tough for him to last all offseason on that 40-man, especially if the Marlins are looking for outside help at that position, which they clearly are. Eric Wagaman is also there. And the Marlins do have control over him for the next half century. So it'll be tough for Troy. I would guess that he does not make it through to spring training with the Marlins.
Well, yeah, I guess, because he could just elect minor league free agency, I guess, in that sense. But just really quickly, a couple guys who are Rule 5, like Joe Mack, you're going to laugh, Spencer Bromwell, Nathan Martorella, Morissette, Hostetler, who else? Andrew Pintar, Jacob Berry. You go even a little lower, Josh White, William Kempner, Dale Stanovich, Matt Pouchard. I'm not even going to mention this last name because no Marlins fan has ever heard of him. So those are the notables that are going to the Rule 5. So as Eli noted, that'll be the next major wave of roster moves.
Yeah.
We saw Dax get added last year, Davison, Jared Serna. So all 3 of those guys are currently still on the 40-man. We'll see what's up with Dax. He had a weird season, ended up being a reliever towards the end of it. And didn't look great. But Isaac, Eli, anything else? Almost an hour in before we wrap up.
Yeah, no, just the obviously the postseason underway. That is probably the next big thing to happen for the Marlins. It's all the 40-man roster decisions they do have to make. We're proud to announce that we'll again have boots on the ground for the 2025 winter meetings that happens in early December. Obviously, still a ways away, but it's one of the more exciting times of the offseason. Not what it used to be, but still, it'll be nice for the third consecutive offseason. Fish on First will have reporters on site for that. And other than that, no. But we will see you guys in 2 weeks.
Yeah, at least the draft lottery won't be a disappointment, right? What is it? 1.3% chance of getting the first overall pick? You never know.
That is true.
Just like the playoff odds. But alrighty, we'll wrap it up here from Isaac, Eli, and myself. We'll see you guys all in 2 weeks. I think by that point we'll actually have a pretty good guest. I feel like it. So see you guys all in 2 weeks. Peace out, and as always, go Fish.